So the self, soul, spirit model starts with the self. Who are you? Who are we as people? Soul is the life force, deep core energy. We're going to get into that. Spirit is the great mystery. We don't know. What else could it be? You know, is it spiritual? Is it, you know, is it of evolution? What's out there? That's a personal belief. But we're going to focus on self and soul. And I want to draw another distinction between science and phenomenology. We'll start with the science, and I'm going to make it as brief as I can, but it's important. And then phenomenology is life as we experience it. That's what this program is really about. It's about how can I have an experience that works for me and works for others. Science is an attempt to know objective truth, right? So the science, let's get into biology. And the very fundamental basis of this model is subpersonalities. This is the idea that we're all made up of various selves, okay? So a personality is a mode of being, perception, behavior, action that has its own motivations, goals, desires, needs. And personalities have evolved. So if you think of a very ancient personality, a hunter-gatherer, a personality is something that can act in the world. So a hunter-gatherer might have a full-fledged neurological circuit that is devoted towards hunting or gathering. That would be considered a personality. As we evolved and met our basic needs, we were able to expand into other pursuits. So we've got survival down. Then we start experimenting with social bonding and love and community and innovation and creativity. So all these different neurological circuits, which a neurological circuit is a circuit in your brain that allows you to act. You can't do anything without your brain. So it starts with the gene, the genetics, not just a single gene, and then that gets encoded into action through your brain. So the big debate, nature versus nurture, it's both. That's been my discovery in research. It's not one or the other. They're not totally separate. You can't do anything without your genes because your genes is what's enabling all your actions. You also can't really discover anything or act at all without the environment. The environment gives you cues. What's needed? So we accommodate based on those cues. So the development of subpersonalities is an evolutionary phenomenon, in my view, in the view that I've studied with Dr. Roger Strachan, who's the founder of this model. So the personality is viewed from a genetic basis, and we're all different, right? But we're also all similar because we're all human. So we have similar but different personalities. Any questions on that so far?
Can you repeat all that?
And again, if this scientific stuff doesn't land for you, don't worry. This isn't the important part of the practice. This is just for those of you who need context. I want you to have it. And then if you want to see the resources, I'll point you in the right direction of where this research comes from. But if you're not someone who's interested in that, just ignore what I'm saying and wait for the good stuff. But it is important that we have some context for those of us that want it. So it's not that one personality exists within you, right? Because then you'd only be able to do one thing. A personality is something that has its own goal, its own motivation. So you would be very constricted. So we have multiple different desires that conflict with one another. Have you ever had two conflicting desires at once? A part of me feels this way, but another part of me feels that way. So essentially you're in a battle with yourself about what to do with your energy. So this morning is a perfect example. I woke up at 4:45, did my reading for school. I have two subpersonalities I've identified that are known as philosopher and teacher. And I woke up this morning, they both came online. So you can think of that neurologically. Those circuits came online, so you got to do your homework, man. So that's what I'm doing. Did my reading. Those are the circuits I'm involved in. Done with that. Then my athlete kicks on. I have an athlete. So not everybody has an athlete. Not everybody's interested in doing athletic activity. But I have an athlete. And the athlete kicks on and says, man, you need to go for a run. But then my caregiver kicked on, which is another part of me, and said, if you run, you're not going to be able to walk your dogs. And your dogs are just going to be sitting around all day. You're not going to be taking good care of them. You can't run. Because my dogs aren't able to run because of their joints. And so the caregiver is arguing with the athlete. And the athlete's thinking, man, I don't give a fuck about that. I just want to go for a run. Leave me alone. You know, and there's the battle right there. So the caregiver won today, this morning. And then after that, I had to go back to philosophy teacher and prepare the schedule for the day. Now, whoever wins the battle at any given moment, it just depends. The environment, the cues, internal drive. We'll get to life force, which is your soul, basically. Consciousness is what it is. That's what gives energy to a part. Carl Jung called it libidinal energy, not sexual libido, but he just viewed it as life force, life energy. So whatever part of you has the life force is the part of you that's going to act. And we can only do so many things at once, so usually only one or two parts of us are really running the show at a time. Right now I'm in teacher, philosopher, and guide. Those are parts of me that are able to teach, to conceptualize, and also able to listen so that I can see where the class is at. Later, I can almost guarantee you there's a part of me that's self-critical. I call it the black hole. It's only a matter of time. Maybe it'll be later tonight. Maybe it'll be on the next break. He comes over and says, man, you really fucked that up. You're not a good teacher. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. That'll happen. And then what do I do when that voice comes? That voice is going to come. I know that about myself. Then the young boy, little 6-year-old, which is another part of myself, sensitive, young, childish part of me, his feelings get all hurt because someone just told him he's a piece of shit. So now I'm sensitive. So that's how this model works. Different circuits get activated, and you go with that. Now, a subpersonality isn't constricted to a certain way of behaving. One subpersonality can do different things. For example, I have a challenger, and Dad and I had this experience together. My challenger used to deal with Dad by just telling him to fuck off. That was my way of dealing with my dad when I was a teenager. We had to grow through that, and my challenger had to learn how to be in that relationship by either not allowing himself to be involved or by using a different type of challenging. A challenger, to me, what it is for me, is a part that likes to defend and protect so that I can't get hurt. So it's protecting young boy, really, is what the challenger is for me. So you'll get to know what all your different personalities are. Now there's coping styles. A coping style personality is fundamentally a personality that's trying to help you deal with life. A coping style, you know, like challenger for me is a coping style. I coped through challenging other people and getting angry when I couldn't handle something. Sound familiar?
Fuck you.
Okay? There's the genetics. Okay? we're
Boy, that just rolled off the
Really, wasn't that?
There's the genetic piece. So we do inherit these capacities, but it depends. Sometimes they're not directly from our parents. Sometimes they're from other parts of our ancestry. And depending on what happens in our childhood, in our life experience, different parts will get activated. If you had a really tough childhood, then most likely certain parts got activated that might not have in a different environment. Okay? So it's not black and white. The environment's very important, and so is the biology of who you are. And we know that no two human beings are alike. Strachan says that all the time. That's been biologically validated. Not even identical twins are exactly the same biologically. So we're all different. We all have different ways of dealing with life. And we all have different experiences, which means that we're going to develop different neurological circuits that are going to encode behavior onto the world differently. Make sense? So nobody's the same. So comparing ourselves to others is essentially futile because it doesn't make any sense because you're literally not that person. You can't be. It's impossible. So let's get this next part up here. Any questions so far about that? The science or the sub-personalities?
So those personalities you were talking about are yourself right now? Correct?
Parts of me, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not your soul yet or spirit. That is just yourself.
That's just myself. Or selves, you know.
And what you find is that those personalities are activated by the environment?
Partially. So Dr. Strachan taught me, and I do believe this, that the stronger the part is, the more it'll push against the environment. Okay? Now, if the part's not quite as tenacious, the environment will push against it. So it just depends. For example, he uses if you come into the world with an IQ of 200, you're going to be taking care of everyone. And IQ is genetic. You know, that's been validated. But, you know, on the other hand, if you come in with an IQ of 70, you're going to be bagging groceries or you're going to be being taken care of by the world, by the environment. That's just one example, you know, of how we're different. It's not good or bad. That's the thing with this model. It is what it is, and it's not good or bad. You just are who you are. It's that simple. You just are who you are. It's what you do with it that matters. So how am I going to be the challenger? If I have a challenger, it's safe to assume that I have that part. That's a part of what it might change and morph, and depending on how much you believe in the ability to completely transform, it might not even look the same by the end of my life. But fundamentally, if you have endogenous depression, it's not reasonable to expect that you're never going to feel that, right? And now, there are people who have reported experiences where their depression went away completely. And that's great. But I encourage people not to assume that that a part of them is going to go away. To assume that you're stuck with this guy. You live with this guy. He's a shitty roommate, or he's a great roommate, depending on which part of you is judging him. And it is what it is. So, how many subpersonalities can a person have? I mean, if you take it all the way down to the instinctual level, we have personalities that are just circuits designed to feel thirsty. So those are all things we share. But we're talking psychologically. Typically, we try to get people to get it down to between 12 and 24, because then you can work the model. If you've got 50 subpersonalities up on your map, you're screwed. You can't. That's not manageable. So what is a workable model? A workable model is something that you can use that is manageable within the framework of I can look at my subpersonalities, I can see how they're working in me, and it's an abstraction. You know, you're doing your best to figure out what's going on. Roger always says we're doing this in lieu of the genome until the genome's able to just map it out for you. That's what he thinks. That's his opinion on it. I kind of like this way of doing it. I hope that the genome doesn't just map it out for us, because then we get to be creative and get involved with defining our own personality. So while you're mapping out your subpersonalities, you got to ask yourself, what part of me is doing this? What part of me is deciding who I am right now? Is it a judger? Is it a trickster? Is it intellectual? Is it an artist? Who gets to decide? Just be aware of that while you're mapping it out. And then you'll have parts of you come up that say, I don't like that part. Let's not put that up there. You don't get to do that. You don't get to, that's one part of you making a decision for another. So if you have a part of you that's difficult for another part of you, then you just put it up there. So why do this? Why would you ever do this? Like, who cares? What's the point of this shit? Like, who gives a shit if you're made up of subpersonalities? Well, self-awareness is really important. Most of the time, we're just doing things. We're not even realizing. We just think we're a single thing. And Roger always tells me, Strachan, don't cram yourself into a single voice. Because when you do that, you fundamentally simplify something that isn't that simple, and you kind of oppress yourself in that way. Try to be only one thing all the time. The truth is you're really full of contradictions. We all are. I want to go for a run, but I got to walk my dogs. That's just life. I mean, that's just true. So learning to accept the contradictions and be aware of them is actually unifying. It helps us make choices of how we're going to proceed. Like, I'm going to walk my dogs because that's what I'm putting first right now. That's not coming from a place of reactivity. That's coming from a place of being mindful of my choices and knowing I'm listening to what different parts of me want. Any questions so far?
So is it the decider or the challenger that makes those decisions?
The decisions will come from different parts depending on the situation. Okay, now, and Roger always tells people, and I like this, he's like, don't worry about who's deciding whether you're going to get the large or medium Slurpee. That's just silly. But this is for really life on a more meaningful level. So who makes the decisions depends on who gets the energy in that moment. That's that simple. So whatever part of you gets the energy makes the choice. But who gives the part the energy? If you're mindful, it's the soul. Now soul, whoop, there goes science, right? But not quite, because life force, energy, consciousness is just being explored now on a physics level. And we know that consciousness exists. We know that we have consciousness. We can't figure out what the hell it is. But consciousness is what happens when you're mindful and you have the ability to direct your attention. When I tell you to meditate and I say put your attention on your foot or make this visualization, you're using consciousness to make that happen. So consciousness is where you want to make the choice from. What would be the most conscious choice you can make? For me this morning it was walking the dogs. That would be the most mindful, soulful, soul-directed choice. So that's an internal frequency that I can generate and feel with my intuition of what the right choice is in that moment. There'll be other times when the soul doesn't know what to do and a more intellectual or organizational part makes a choice. So it all depends on the situation. This model is really something that you have to utilize and work on a daily, weekly basis. So once we get you out on this exercise where you're identifying the parts of you, it's something that I want you to be interactive with. Okay, so there's different ways that we can do that. There's the empty chair technique. Can I borrow that? Which is a dialectical process. Has anyone here heard of the Hegelian dialectic? Okay, so Hegel was a philosopher. He had this idea that there was, three components to a process that moves forward. There's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Okay, that's how things happen. In business deals and conversations, there's a thesis, there's an antithesis, and then there's a synthesis, which moves us forward. So there's a contradiction. And then there's a reconciliation of the contradiction, which allows movement. That's how evolution really works, really. It's like tension is building organismically, and then it has no choice but to either die off or explode and grow to the next level. On a side note, Piaget found out with his theory of cognitive leaps that we make these cognitive leaps. So how we learn is there's this maximum energization and this maximum confusion and disequilibrium. And there's this leap. We don't grow linearly. We grow in leaps. So it's like this. We don't grow like this. It's like random. Have you ever had a growth spurt? Like psychologically, where it's like, whoa, I just like breakthrough. It happens in this weird gap would be the right word. It's a gap. So that cognitive learning model also applies to how we transform psychologically, meaningful experiences. They just... So in this program, you'll have moments where you're at maximum disequilibrium and maximum energization, and you're like, probably at that point, you're like, I don't want to fucking be here, right? Or you're like, this is confusing, I don't get it. There's a conflict. If you stick with it, in all likelihood, there'll be a leap. It's just a matter of time. Some people it takes longer than others. Anyways, that's a side tangent. But what I want to say is that there's different ways of working with, and I'm cranking this up too loud, I'm yelling. There's different ways of working with these subpersonalities. Empty chair technique, this comes from Gestalt therapy. Okay, an empty chair technique is essentially you get in the chair with the part. Okay, I'll give you an example of what happened for me yesterday. I'll be a little vulnerable just to set a good example. Black hole. Okay, this is the part of me self-critical and depressed. Man, I really fucked up today. I think I might have taught that wrong. I don't know. I think I really screwed that up. That was really hard for me, and I don't think I've learned enough. I don't think I'm smart enough. I don't think I've done enough research. I'm a fucking con artist. I'm just making this shit up. Nobody really knows what they're talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not legit. I'm a fucking idiot. Okay? That voice is real in me. I know it's a little heavy. Okay? Boy, 6-year-old. I'll talk about the inner child here in a minute. Wow, I just feel horrible after hearing that. I don't want to be this way. Nobody loves me. I don't feel cared for or loved. Okay? So there's something, a voice comes in, somebody takes the brunt of the blow. How do I resolve that conflict? Well, there's a lot of different ways. This is creative. This is, how are you going to resolve? If that was your conflict, how will you resolve that conflict? So I do a meditation, and I take all the parts of me that I know that could respond to the black hole and protect the boy. So I take the seeker, which is a part that's spiritual, likes to seek spiritual meaning. I take the joker, which is a part that likes to make fun and be sarcastic and poke at things and laugh. I take the, what else? I've got the soul here. There's another part in there. A little bit of the challenger to help protect the boy. And I look at the black hole and I just say, get another chair or whatever. You can also do this in your journal, just like a dialogue that you're writing down, depending on what works for you. And I poke fun and say, well, you're always saying shit like that anyway. It wouldn't matter if I fucking won the Nobel Prize. You'd still be an asshole. So what does it matter? What do I care what you think? Okay? The seeker says, we're doing great. We've been making progress. I know that we're always going to have something new to learn. And sure, we might have made a couple mistakes, but that's all right. And the challenger says, yeah, dude, get the fuck out of here. What are you talking about? Okay? So that's how that works. So then I felt better immediately. It works. Because you are engaging the process. Now, if I didn't do anything, the depression would fester and I'd be Eeyore all day today. I don't think I can teach. I feel my stomach hurts. Something like that. So that's how this model works. Dr. Strachan called his Center for Creative Choice. You are who you are. What are you going to do about it? It's your choice. What parts of you do you want to use? Any given situation, you have a creative choice. Center for Creative Choice. So this is all about learning how to make a creative choice. So that was my creative choice of how to deal with that conflict. Could have done it a million different ways, and that's the way that worked for me. Now, in order to do this, you have to take responsibility for anything that you feel at any given moment. From this point forward, if you're going to accept this as a model, nothing that you ever feel is anyone else's fault. Doesn't matter if someone murders somebody or steals something from you. It's whatever you're feeling is your responsibility. So what are you going to do about that? Questions?
Are these not the inner voices that, I mean, they are, right? They're the inner voices that play through our head
Yes.
all the time.
Yes, exactly.
That dialogue happens
Right.
often.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Always having a conversation.
right.
Always something going on back there.
So is it your id and ego and superego that are?
Well, Freud had, okay, so according to Strachan, that's simply id, impulses,
Right.
instincts, personalities that want to do things, you know, I want to have sex, I want to get this, I want to do that. It's just boom, I have urges. Ego, well, pump the brakes, man. We've got this like big society, superego. We've got this big superego society we got to deal with. We can't just be walking around doing all that stuff. So really it's just parts that want to do things, a part that says ego, which ego doesn't mean anything besides a part of me that is in my first person consciousness. Ego is just a word that people use. But ego, part of me that's in my first person consciousness that looks at myself as an I, which may or may not be arrogant, says, oh, we can't do that. So let's make a compromise. It's a managing. So I'm not going to steal bread. I'm going to, figure out how to make a buck so I can buy bread. Okay, that's, and we all have parts like that, unless we are psychopaths who don't have parts like that. That's that simple. They didn't come in with a part like that. So they missed the link somehow, and they don't give a shit about stealing your bread. They don't have the regulating force. So superegos just means societal norms, expectations. Does that make sense? So empty chair technique, that's a Gestalt model. It started out as top dog, underdog. You'd take the part that was the top dog and then the part that was the underdog, and then they'd have a conversation. But now it's just any parts of you that are in conflict or confrontation. Now soul is a great place to be able to work from, because when you're in soul, let's say you're in that deep mindful place, or you go down the stairs of that meditation, which I have a link on YouTube to I can share with you, and you're in that light, that's soul, that feeling. You can actually speak from your soul. You got to practice it. And soul can send energy to parts or respond or set boundaries, okay? And that's all possible too. But I encourage you, get in dialogue with yourself. Be weird, just like you were out there talking to that tree. Get really weird with it. Talk to yourself out loud. This is something that if you do it, it really works. It really works. It's a great therapeutic technique. And you're your own best therapist with the model. You got this. You can do this. Now, it's helpful to have another person. I'm going to be meeting with all of you to help you refine your subpersonalities, figure out what's going on. But anytime you have a conflict or anything's going on, just get in the habit of taking some time, 5 minutes, and having a conversation with yourself. Seeing what happens. And the conversation might be just like butting heads, but at least you're growing awareness, right? There's often times when the conflict is so strong between two parts of you that it's just like this. It's like me and my dad, trying to argue about something when I was a teenager. It's almost irresolvable. But that awareness over time will generate solutions. So just keep sticking with it.
Can I say something on that?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, so I have a part, it's righteous. And it's fucking lights out. Righteous comes up. It's just like, did something wrong and I'm right. And I might get flooded out. So, what we learned is, I'll tell you the first story is that Ryan called one day and he said something, and I said something back he didn't like, and it was a typical click. He calls back about a half hour later and he says, Dad, we got a great relationship, but it could be a lot better. I don't tell you things. I don't really share with you. We have a good relationship, but, I said, oh, great. And then we talked a little bit, and I thought it over, and I called him back the next day. I said, well, you want to go to work on it? He says, what do you mean? I said, I know this guy, Roger Strachan, and he does parts work. And this work also was a pivotal thing in saving my marriage. My wife and I did this work when before this. But anyway, so we both went. Roger came up and worked with us, and we found that his challenger triggered my righteous, and it was like immediately, boom, and it was just lights out. There were just two parts that locked. I'll tell you, like, my wife was a huge one. I learned. I mean, I'm a teacher, right? Guess what? My wife doesn't want to be taught.
That's a universal thing.
Exactly. I was the last one to find that out. So I don't teach my wife anymore. You know, I just learned just don't do that. But
fantastic.
Huge.
And that's the key to this model, how it applies socially, which is what we started. How do you be in the world? And you figure out what parts do you need to bring to any given situation. My partner, Victoria, doesn't like when I teach her either. So always wondering, you know, what's happening here? What parts are at play? What am I bringing to the table here in this moment? And what is that other person bringing to the table? You know? And you'll find that oftentimes relationships are so much more simple when you just realize that, oh, a part of me was just conflicted with a part of them. But then there's other parts of us that are like totally friends and we can figure this out. But I have to get that part that's in the way out of the way first, which is what he's talking about. So in order for Dad to make space for the relationship, he had to take righteousness, and I know everything, out of the door. And in order for me to make progress with Dad, I had to take fuck you, Dad, out of the door.
And now it's a joke. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it might be letting off a little steam every once in a while.
A joke.
Yeah.
But we couldn't do this.
No, I mean, this wouldn't have lasted 2 hours.
Yeah.
The first day I would have been, fuck you, I'm out of here. And the whole class would think, what the hell is wrong with your son?
He's an asshole.
So that's the model. Now, in relationships, take accountability, and especially with the intimate partners that aren't going to like judge you. I'm not suggesting you go do it at the coffee shop with a random stranger, but my partner's name is Victoria. Hey, Victoria, my challenger really is upset, and I'm really working with him to calm down right now, and I just need some time because I'm just not going to be very nice to talk to until I get this figured out. And I want to figure this out. You know, my caregiver and my lover want to figure this out with you, but I need some time. You know, and if you want to talk to my challenger right now, all you're going to get is a fight. So can we time out? That's taking responsibility. Sometimes she gets annoyed. She's like, man, like, you're always doing this self-awareness bullshit and whatever. But it works. It actually softens her up, you know, even though she puts up a false front at first. Because people like authenticity. They do. People like it when you're honest. They don't like it when you're fucking snaky and lying and trying to be someone you're not, you know? They don't like righteous anger that's trying to act like you have something to prove, or that, you know, they like it when you're just like, man, I'm really angry and I don't want to feel this way, and I know I'm probably full of shit, but this is what I got right now, you know?
I'll add one more thing.
Go.
I use mine anytime I'm going in a new situation. I have a traveling ones in my briefcase. Like, because if I'm going into a business meeting, you know, I have a negotiator. He's powerful. But if I'm going to a vacation, I don't want to bring him.
Right.
You know, I might, you know, bring him as I'm setting up the trip or something, but I wouldn't want him to go on the plane.
Right.
You know, it just wouldn't be a fun vacation.
Exactly.
At all. So I have, you know, I have a little boy, a 5-year-old little boy that I try to take. You know, I try to take some of that, something that's more fun, and bring my father, the father in me, bring my husband, bring joy. You know, anyway, the parts can in one situation be great, and in another situation really destructive. So it's good awareness, because you start noticing when a part comes up, and you just try to set it aside. Or over time you can reposition a part. Like, I have a sensitive. Believe it or not, my feelings get hurt really easy. And I historically wouldn't give a shit about you. But I tried to rework the sensitive to be more sensitive of other people and not as sensitive of my own, taking things personally myself. I still have a sensitive, but over time I've tried to reposition to do that. I hope that was on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the sensitivity runs through our family. You can see it in my sister. Colton has a little bit of it.
Hey.
As you can see.
Mother.
Our mom doesn't really have that sensitivity. She's much more internally resolved, emotionally strong. I mean, she gets overworked and takes care of people too much, and that's where my caregiver comes from. But mom doesn't bring that same sensitivity to the table. So that's the other thing is, it just is what it is. I've got strong sensitivity. It is what it is. So it's my responsibility to work with it. It's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. I'm not going to make everyone walk eggshells around me. That's manipulation, right? People do that. People manipulate their environment so they don't have to feel uncomfortable. That's just what we do. Honestly, if I can only get them to act this way, then I'd feel okay. But this model is all about, what do I need to do to feel okay? So it's all about personal responsibility. Dr. Strachan doesn't have sensitivity strongly. And we talk about it all the time. He doesn't give a shit. It doesn't fucking matter to him. It's just his personality. And he's very frank about that. Neuroplasticity, buzzword. Everybody probably knows it, no? You've heard of it?
Yeah.
And has anyone not heard that word? Okay, the ability for the brain to change. So the adaptability of your brain to change and build new neurological circuits. So if you imagine you had a part of you that wanted to manifest itself differently, then the key would be to create a new habit that would allow that part to take form in the world in that way. So now my challenger used to be protect the young boy by telling everyone else to fuck off. That was the old pathway. New pathway is context. Are there situations where someone might need to be told to fuck off? Maybe, sometimes. There might be a situation where that's true. Not very often. So bring to any given situation what the situation needs. Yes, no, maybe. Hey, that doesn't land well for me. Whatever. Challenger now holds good boundaries, but doesn't bring, as Strachan told me, 10 pounds to a 1 pound argument. Okay? We have a great story. So I was working here at LC as just getting to know the business. It was like once a month I would come out and work with an old employee here. And we had a confrontation, the old employee and I. And the confrontation was something like, hey, Ryan, I need you to do more here. And sensitive kicked on. This was years ago. Challenger kicked on. Fuck this. I'm out of here. Fuck you. Out. So I'm left, because that hadn't happened in a while. I had really worked really hard to control my temper at that point. So I'm left feeling really depleted because I'm like, I just totally conducted myself in an awful way, and I'm in this conflict with this person, and I feel horrible. And so I called Roger, and he said, well, Ryan, you brought 10 pounds to a 1 pound argument. You know what? All you needed to say was, well, I don't really want to work here anyway, so see you later. But instead I went full Rambo. Okay? So Rambo is great. If somebody was trying to kill me, I'd need him. Okay? He's there for a reason. But Rambo's not for civil discourse. So I've had to learn that. So now somebody says, hey, Ryan, I'm pissed at you. I can feel the urge the adrenaline goes up, and I can feel that my temperament wants to pounce. But I've got a new neural pathway now that breathes and says, it's all right, buddy, just relax. And I know it's about the young boy. That's the bottom line, too. I'm aware. It's like, I don't really, I'm just sensitive. That's all it is. I feel threatened. So I want to fight. Ancient biology, fight or flight. It's that simple. Fight, flight, or freeze. A lot of people have more freeze. They're traumatized. They have parts of them that are stuck in trauma. You might know someone. You might be like that yourself sometimes. Freeze is a response where we don't know what else to do. So we just freeze. Okay? Now,
Say one thing there?
yeah.
Oh, no, is this all right?
Go for it, please.
So there's a new neural pathway, but there's another concept that, I don't know if Rob made this up or not, but it's
The Grand Canyon?
The Grand Canyon
Yeah.
effect is that the old pathway is deep. So you have a new pathway, but oftentimes, it's the default is still it gets on the side bank of that Grand Canyon and goes, oh, you just gotta get me back up. Ah.
Exactly.
It just wants to hijack you. It just wants because it's so, that anger or whatever it is, or fear or...
Yes, and that's where being realistic comes in. A lot of people love transformation. They love the idea of transformation. I'm going to go transform. But it's a process, and to be honest with you, my depression hasn't gone away, and I've been working on it for a decade. It's much better. It used to be a week or two at a time. Now it's like it comes and goes a couple hours, okay? But it still comes. So Dad doesn't have that. He never had that part of him, the depression. My mom has it, okay? So the point in what I'm trying to say is that when the depression comes, I don't judge it and be like, wow, I really didn't do enough transformation. I understand that there's a circuit in my brain that does that. And some circuits are going to be with us our whole life. It's just that simple. Some of them we will change. And depending on how much you believe in spirituality, maybe you could totally change everything, and there's some research that indicates that that's a possibility. But for the most part, in all likelihood, you're going to remain with most of the parts of who you are. You're just going to figure out how to manifest them differently. So now, for me, the black hole, although it still comes with things like it did yesterday, it also comes with tenderness and grief. There's nothing wrong with grief. Sometimes life is just sad. So you learn to give every part of you a job, okay? Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say the awareness that he's going to give you this afternoon is the real gift of these different parts.
Absolutely, yeah. And here's another word I want you to keep in mind. Repurposing. So repurposing is when you take a part, like the Challenger or the black hole, sensitive, and you give it something else to do. It wants something to do. It's like what are the German Shepherds, for example? They need something to do. You got to give them something to do. So if I tell the Challenger, listen, your old job, it's not working. What I need you to do is be ready if shit does hit the fan, and I also need you to hold good boundaries and stand up for yourself and be assertive. Say what you want, mean what you say. That's a great strength. We were talking about not saying no or not saying yes when you mean no. Challenger can do that. No, I'm not going to make it. There's a lot of parts of me that can't do that. Caregiver can't do that. Caregiver's I want to do it to make you happy. But Challenger can just say no. So learn how to repurpose your parts. Center for creative choice. What is the creative choice that you can make with this part of you? I do not want you to try to get rid of the part. I want you to figure out what to do with it. I don't care how bad other parts of you don't like it. Figure out what to do with it. Give it something to do. And in order to make that process happen, you might need to do some sort of ceremony or healing process to let go of the old and make room for the new. We don't want to let go of the old. Funny joke. So I'm talking to a very close friend of mine who has depression. And they were very depressed. And my joker came out and was making them laugh. Guess what they said? Don't make me laugh, I'm depressed. Don't make me laugh, I'm depressed. So that implies that they want to be depressed. That's what the parts of us that are doing with it, they want to do that. Depression wants to be depressed. It's proactively depressed. Now, of course, yes, there's trauma and there's things that happen to us that put us down that, but then once we get the victim going, we tend to want to stay with it. Certain people who have stronger proclivities to being a victim. Some people don't struggle with that as much. So, does that make sense what I'm trying to say? When the Challenger's going full Rambo, that's what he wants to do. He wants to do that. He'd love to spin it and act like, well, you gave me no choice. But that's a post hoc rationalization. Okay? That's the other key to this model. And this is a Strachan quote that I'm about to give you. We do what we want to do at any given moment. Human beings are the only species that do what they want to do at any given moment and then make up a reason why. My mom made me do it. Or they made me angry. Or, well, I quit. So you see, I quit my job because the economy and this and that. Whatever. We really aren't that rational as we like to think. We just do things politically. Okay, Jonathan Haidt has a great book, Righteous Mind. People just believe what they want to believe. That's what it's their little feelies. They like them. They want to keep them, right? And then they rationalize it. Now, that's not to say that rationality doesn't have a place. Of course, intellectualism and rationality is one of the cornerstones of society. It does have I have a philosopher. I could study this shit all day. I could study evolution and subpersonalities. I could do that for days and days. But truly, most of the time, we're engaging the world from a place of emotional intuition, and then we're using rationality as a way to justify our choices. Because we want to do things. I want to give. I want to be of service. I can make up all these rational reasons why, but I just want to do it. Right? Or I want to be angry. I can tell you why. I make a big bullshit story about all the reasons why I'm angry. And it might be convincing. I might be a great storyteller. Right? But at the end of the day, that's just what wants to happen. So we don't make excuses in this model. We just state what is. Okay? So that when the challenger's up to bat in the conversation, in the chair work, or when you're working your parts, the challenger doesn't get to say, well, let me explain myself. No, the challenger just says, I'm pissed. And I'd like you to fuck off. That's just what it is. All the other stuff is fabrications and stories. Black hole says, I'm depressed and I feel like a piece of shit. So, is that making sense? State what is. Is there anything confusing about that?
Right, could you clarify why it's important for you to take responsibility for your emotions more so than putting it on others, and how that empowers you?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, almost the answer is in the question, and there's more to that, because you're totally powerless if you give someone else your power. So if it's someone else's fault, you have no power. That's simple, right? I mean, even if they did do something wrong, why give them your power? In Alcoholics Anonymous, we always take our part, no matter how fucked up the other person was. And I'm a recovering alcoholic. Been sober almost 10 years. So we always take responsibility for our part, even if the other person did worse. And when we don't focus on them, we focus on ourselves, because that's the way to recovery. That's the way to healing. People don't want to do that. People don't want to work this model because it's hard. Like, to actually be conscious of who's doing what inside of you and take responsibility for that in any given moment is difficult. So people fizzle out. They work it, and then they get some cool little tidbits, and then they bounce. And a lot of the people that do stick with it are amazing. They get great benefits. But for most people, they do it for a couple weeks, so that was a cool exercise. And then they go right back to single voice. To, it's just me. There's no nuance here.
So we'll be using this when you bring these in your meetings with Ryan or I. First meeting with Ryan, we'll be really nailing it down, and then you'll bring these to your meetings, and we'll work on them, as far as what's going on with you, and work the parts with it.
Exactly.
Through the whole program.
So Dad has asked me to bring in the concept of shadow, which is a Jungian term. Does anyone have any idea what shadow is? Can you just throw some things out there? Anybody?
It's that part of ourselves we don't want the world to see.
Or that we ourselves don't want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else?
And maybe not aware of it.
Yeah, that was just something that I try to hide, would be my shadow, and I'm sure, like Eric just said, there's parts of me that I'm not even aware of that probably aren't the best.
Yeah.
Or dark.
Yeah. So I want to strip shadow down to just something simple here. Any part of yourself that you're uncomfortable with, that there's some sort of aversion to or some sort of suppression of, so any of that is mostly shadow. It's like, and what happens with this term shadow is it gets complicated and construed as deep darkness, and it's really just parts of myself I haven't integrated. So shadow could be good or bad, depending on your value judgment. Shadow could be having a hard time feeling pleasure, or having a hard time coming to tears, or anything. It could be, it's so simple, really. It's things that we try to avoid or suppress or mitigate because it's just not comfortable, okay? Or we have some part of us has an agenda to keep us away from that. You know, for example, Challenger might say, well, if the spiritual seeker and the poet and the lover and the conceptualizer come online, then I might not have as much power anymore. So I'm going to do everything I can to take energy back from them and avoid them, right? So parts of us will try to take energy back. If you confront the part of you that's used to having control and you try to tell them, hey, this isn't working anymore, man, like setting a boundary in a relationship, they're not going to like it, most likely. So you got to be strong, and you got to have the conversation. You got to use your mindfulness to work that situation, and it's hard. So that is, and let me just tell you all the parts of me so you know: caregiver, challenger, boy, and I'll get to the inner child in a second. Joker, athlete, teacher, lazy bear, shaman, friend, lover, workhorse, addict, wild man, warrior, which is a little different than the challenger for me, cosmic cowboy, guide, philosopher, conceptualizer, poet, seeker, black hole. Each of these parts has their own way of motivating and conceptualizing and relating to the world. That's my parts. That's how I've done it. It's changed over the years. There was different parts for the first couple years, and then I gained more self-awareness and I changed things. So that'll probably happen for you. It might change over the days. It might not change for 5 years.
And a few people here did this with me a year and a half ago or so.
Okay, fantastic. So you have some awareness of the model. Yeah. Now, inner child, most people have a part of them that is a child. That is very typical, and it would be questionable if someone said they didn't, because most people do, but if you don't feel you have an inner child, then that's fine. I have a funny story. We were doing a training with the company I used to work for on this model, and I had a woman say, I don't have an inner child. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, I don't have an inner child. Well, turns out she just really, there was a part of her that really didn't like her inner child, because it was a lot of emotions in there. So she was just holding that in, and it came out after a while that she does, and it was just really hard to be that part because the trauma or whatever was there, okay? So be gentle with yourself if you have a part that's really feeling that way, and ask for support if that's the case. But yeah, you most likely have a party that's kind of naive and playful and loving and childlike. That's probably the case. I mean, we all do. And they typically have an age, either a very important age of our life, or an age where something difficult happened, or an age where we really came into our personality differently. So figure out, how old does your child feel? Now, again, I want to revisit universalizing. Again, nobody is the same. Don't assume that other people have parts like you, because it's just not the case. And just remember that you're a unique human being. So whatever you bring to the table is yours, and don't expect yourself to be like someone else, and don't expect others to be like you. That's not right. It's not fair. So, and there is no value judgments. Again, no value judgments. That's kind of weird for us Judeo-Christian Westerners, because we have rights and wrongs and goods and evils. The black hole is evil. While that might be true objectively in a spiritual or a religious sense, that's not how we work this model. This isn't a debate about the the religious truth of that matter. This is just, we don't view parts as good or bad.
Got a question for you.
Yeah.
When you were first going through this, did you find that one part of you kind of mentioned, noticing which part is choosing another part?
Yeah.
Did you find that one part of you was really trying to control choosing?
Yeah, for me it was like the philosopher conceptualizer, like trying to make a map.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to, and be aware of that, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It
It was
does.
like, I really
see
want to
that,
map this out, and
Yeah.
so it can get a little construed with trying to make a cool map rather than actually just saying what is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was.
What I invite you to do is to close your eyes as you're doing this every time you need to, and reset and ask yourself, who else is here? Go to your soul, surrender. Who else wants to come up to the table and tell me that they exist, or who else exists? Do it from a place of intuition rather than a place of trying to rationalize or force things, right? And just be aware what parts of you are judging, what parts of you are trying to run the show, having a lot of opinions about you or about different parts of you. And just, again, awareness is curative. So just be aware of that and come back to your intention, which is just to allow things to be. This value thing is going to come in very important because you'll notice how judgmental we can be about certain parts. So we're going to keep hammering that in. Let go of the value. Just allow it to be.
And I'd say set whatever definition of ego today, but set your egos aside, and this is a safe space. Don't be afraid to put a part out there. You can also take a part down later, you put them up, and you say, hey, no, that's not really, it's your model. This is going to be yours. So don't be afraid to, come out with something and see how it sticks, whatnot, that sometimes we don't want to show, say, oh, God, that wouldn't look good. This is the time and this space to show it,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the whole ego thing, to me, just for and that's just a personal preference, where how I study and read psychology is ego doesn't have any meaning. It's just a word that's been misconstrued. Of course, there is arrogance and there is certain things that are conflated with ego, but I would just view that as a certain subpersonality that is being called ego, which I just think it's a blanket term that gets thrown around. However, it's a useful term in that we have defense mechanisms that come into play that are buffering us against reality and trying to help us either protect ourselves or gets us into a pathological experiment with life where it's like, oh shit, like I was bracing too hard trying to protect myself, and then that ended up having consequences. So it's a useful term. I just think I'm a little bit counterculture with it personally because of my challenger. So, okay, other piece. When you're doing this work, don't speak about the part, speak from the part. Okay, so I am the teacher, philosopher, and right now I am teaching. So you don't speak about it, you just be it. And then you switch and you speak from another part that wants to speak. That makes the model real. It brings it to life. You're breathing life into the model. That's the gestalt. Gestalt is about being, becoming. What become the process. Don't just think about the process, be the process. So it's a bit of it's kind of a psychodrama, right? It's like you're putting yourself on stage and you're allowing yourself to express what's there. With journaling, it's a great exercise. You can actually do a dialogue that's written down. For those of you who are less, what's a good word? About presenting yourself. You're less inclined to present yourself and be an actor or an actress. You might be a little quieter in your process. You might talk a little quieter. I'm very animated. That's just my personality. Those are parts of me that get animated, so that's how I work it. For some people, journaling the parts or doing quiet reflection and sitting from one chair to another, or going out into nature and mapping out all your parts with stones and talking from one stone to the other and having some really nice solitude and self-reflection. What is the goal of the work? The goal of the work is the process. There's a great Choi Gyum-Trungpa quote, a book that he wrote. The path is the goal. Do the process and things will happen. Stick with your soul as the authority. The soul is the authority. The soul is the one who decides. The buck stops with the soul is what Roger says. So you want to let the soul have the control.
So, can I just say something?
Please.
There? Is that that may not be the natural state of your life up and through this point, but the goal of this program is that that's the constant enlightenment, is that you look inside. Your soul is making your choices. You have a soul-driven life. And this is a model that can really help you with that. So when he says that, it's consistent with that. Look inside. Find, identify this. When I started doing this work, I didn't know I had a soul. I just hadn't spent the time to look at it, and I said I believed in God. I had no experience related to God. I didn't know God. So this is a chance to know that for yourself, tap into your soul. So don't, really spend some time listening. Is that where this is going? Who am I? Who's, right in the third eye. Who am I? Who's picking this? Fucking A, I am.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not the other voices of the moms and the dads and the culture and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's right inside here. Fuck me, I'm doing it.
More information on culture. So in Gestalt, we call that introjects. It's a message that comes from outside that gets hooked into us. Okay, so boys don't cry, girls aren't tough, you should make this much money, you should value these things. Mom and dad believe this, so I have to believe this too. Society thinks that you're supposed to be a certain way. So those are outside beliefs that stick into you. They stick to certain parts of you. So there's a compatible resonance, because in this model, another little catchphrase, everything is attraction and connection. So when there is an attraction to a part of you from something outside, it'll cling on. So my boy is vulnerable to criticism because there's an attraction and connection. Strachan, because he doesn't have the same sensitivity, there is no attraction and connection to criticism. So criticism goes through him, and his problem happens to be arrogance, what a lot of people would call ego. So for Strachan, it's the opposite. It's, I'm too self-critical, and he's wrestles with pride. And he's very aware of that, So that's something he shares openly and that we talk about.
I can say another example of that too is like critic. A lot of people have an inner critic. But most people have a critic of one kind or another. It's like, damn, idiot, Some of us, I have a critic, but my critic is, damn, you idiot.
It's an external critic.
Yeah.
So there's internal critics and external critics. Yeah, and a lot of people have an inner judge or an inner critic that's either externally or internally oriented. So even there might be a party that's judged me, right, on the stage. That say, well, fuck that, or that doesn't make any sense, or whatever. That's a part. That's one of your parts. So it's not good or bad, it just is what it is. Or there might be a party that's sitting there, I'm not up to this. I'm not up to this model. So that might be more of a self-critic. I'm not capable. So self-critics are another popular one. Archetypes are a good way, and we're almost done, so hang in. Archetypes are a good way to get inspiration for your subpersonality. So look at or think about the archetypes that you see in movies, that you read in books, whether it be magician or jokester or trickster or businessman or hero, of course, hero, warrior. You can think of them all. Now, archetypes are society's way of understanding collective images that are represented through human beings. So remember, the archetype is a doorway into the personality, but it is not who you are. You are not that archetype. The archetype is helping you understand something about yourself. How am I a warrior? How is my warrior unique? It's different than the one I saw in the movie, but it's similar at the same time. So how is it unique? Okay, can someone turn the AC on, please? It's a little.
It's on.
Oh, it is? Maybe I'm just hot.
77, so
From all
it's
this
not
walking
working
around
right.
and yelling.
It is 77, but it is on.
Okay, it does feel a little warm, but it's okay.
Kind of a nice temperature.
Yeah, if you like it, that's great.
Should we do hot yoga?
I'm just in the hot seat. That's really what it is. So let me just make sure I'm not missing anything, because I think there's a few more essential pieces that we should not forget before you get going. While I'm marinating, questions, comments, concerns, rebuttals, resistance.
How many sub-personalities have you found for yourself?
I think I'm at like 19 or 20 right now. I was at 23 at one point, but I narrowed it down.
Are each one of those magnets one of them?
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. You can get one of these magnet systems done. We can help you find someone to do that for you. I recommend it.
I'm going to
So,
try to get you each a little travel one like I did before. It's a thing like this. If Miguel is still doing them after you meet with Ryan and you get everything wired down.
Cool.
That'd be great.
These, you'll use these to begin with, and they're great. You can keep them in your notebook.
So so the idea today is really just to lay out some of our personalities and then sit down and kind of drill through it, review it.
Yeah, so I'll give you that exercise here, and what that's going to be is I want you to get a piece of paper and a pen first and write down everything that comes to mind that could be a subpersonality, okay? After you do that, I want you to use the sticky notes on one of these sheets of paper on the wall and consolidate. So look for doubles. Like a lot of times people will come up with 50 or 60 or more, and there's a lot of repeats, you know? So be aware of things that are actually the same. Like a critic and a judge, for example, could be the same. Or a warrior and the challenger could be the same, but in this case they're not. So be discerning about similarities within your system. And
sometimes it's adjectives that aren't really parts.
yeah, and I don't expect you to get it down to below 24 today. I'd be happy if it was hovering around 30. When we have our one-on-one meeting in September, we're going to narrow it down, and you might be able to narrow it down more in the meantime, between now and then. So that's going to be the assignment. I'm not going to have you do, unless there's an extra amount of time. If you get done early, come to me. I'm going to give you another exercise. But I'm not going to have you do the empty chair technique or any real exercises with this. I just want you to get to know what they are. And as you're moving through them, just feel what that's like to you. And then your homework, if it fits in with everything else, hopefully, will be to implement this model as a part of your ritual, your routine, and to start talking from the different parts. Okay? And then when we get on one-on-one, we'll actually be more interactive. We'll be doing stuff like the chair technique if we have time, but essentially we're just going to try to get you a functional 12 to 24 parts if we can. If it's 25 or 26, it is what it is. But see if you can narrow it down without.
And in the book there is a good part of mine, not all that you see there.
Yeah, and I have more resources. I have interviews I've done with Dr. Strachan. I've worked very closely with him, been certified, trained with him, and we've got that on YouTube. We have articles and essays and all sorts of stuff that will help you understand this model. I could talk about it all day, but really the best way to learn this is to do it. So coping styles, talents. I'm giving you categories, and I'll try to write these down after. Coping styles, talents, characteristics like proclivities, athleticism's one, intelligence, creativity is another category, imagination. Some people have more vivid imaginations or are really into fantasies and stuff like that. Intellectualism. There's more, but I'll think of them as I'm sitting down and put them up on the board. Can anyone think of other categories that might fit into this, of parts that could be, that haven't been mentioned? Anything come to mind that could help?
Relationship?
Yep, relationships like a lover, somebody who's a partner, a husband. Father. A lot of people know they're going to be a father way before they're a father. So there's a part of them that's a father or a mother.
But there's natural fathers, and there's some that are biological fathers, but not really a natural father. We're looking for someone that's it's just your calling.
Right. You're called to be a father. That's a very good point. Yeah. So
not just whether it is a fact that you have physically are a father, but are you called to it? Or are you just actually a father, actually a teacher? You know, that kind of stuff.
Are there any other categories that anyone wants to shout out that they can think of?
Thinking about your kind of shadow items or what you're, I think that helps.
What are the areas that you're avoiding about yourself? Good question. That's great, Chris. Okay, so we're going to hover around the room while you're working on this, and we're here. If you need anything, I'm here. Dad has been trained in this model as well. He's qualified to help you, very much so. So please lean on him, lean on me, and we want to help you get started here. Thank you for tuning in to this lecture from Living in the Gap, presented by Sorting Myself Out. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything. Please also see the description so you can see the sources and links that are provided.